Hello everyone, welcome to my very first YouTube video. Today I will be talking about one of the beginner challenges that developers face when they are trying to build .NET MAUI apps, trying to connect those apps, the mobile apps, to the local backend API, which could maybe be running on IIS. So the title of this video is Backend API Hosting and Accessibility. And in this, I will be trying to describe why local host doesn't always work on the emulators and what you would use instead. I would also be talking about how to configure your Android app such that it would allow HTTP traffic. In other words, it will be able to allow HTTP clear text. For the sake of people who are just joining or people who are developing, beginners, people who are just starting their first mobile app experience, I would give a brief definition of .NET MAUI apps, which is also known as the multi-platform app UI. It's Microsoft's cross-platform framework for building apps with a single code base. That is, you build app with one code base and then you deploy on all the platforms. Platforms that are currently supported include Android OS, iOS, Mac OS, and Windows. So you could build one app, one code base with one code base, and then deploy across these different platforms. So today I'll be talking to you about some of those things you may experience when trying to deploy that app on a local server, maybe your Internet Information Service Server, IIS, and to support me to make sure others can find this video and similar videos like this that I will be posting. Click on the like button, subscribe, and follow up as we continue to build this or continue to show you how to solve these major problems that you may face when you are building a .NET MAUI apps, and hopefully save you from a lot of pain and hassle which I experienced when I was trying to build this app myself. Follow me on to the next page. So I'm going to present the back-end compatibility problem using a very structured approach in this video. The very first one is I'll try to demonstrate the problem, talk about the problem, why it occurs. And second, I would also try to explain the root causes, what the root cause is, and how you can navigate the root cause, and hopefully present the fix as well. The solutions itself have been developed, so I've split the solutions into two. One that contains the problem, so I will run the solution. You would see the problem in real time, and then I will then describe the fix in the other solution, and then run it, and you see that the problem has been resolved. And we'll then talk about key takeaways to this video, and also the next steps that we could follow from this video. So typically, when you run your app from the Windows environment, it works. It connects to the API, which you have deployed on the IIS server, so it works, right? But when you then try to deploy that same app through the mobile emulator, you find this strange error saying connection failure, or sometimes the error could come in as connection refused error. So basically, this presentation is about to just show you why that's happened. So it happens for two major reasons. One is the emulator can't access the localhost. This is usually because the localhost inside the emulator points to the emulator itself. So the localhost does not recognize, the emulator does not recognize the localhost on your machine, because you have to remember that the localhost, the emulator is a virtual machine on its own, and your laptop or your server machine, wherever you're running the emulator on, is a separate environment on its own. So localhost is recognized on your environment, but it is not recognized on the emulator. So, but when you say localhost within the emulator, it's pointing to itself. And but when you say localhost within your environment, it's pointing to your laptop. So it doesn't know that. And on top of that, again, if your API, if you have deployed your API on your IIS server, say maybe for testing, and you deploy it on the HTTP, not the secured mode, which is HTTPS, Android usually would block the communication to that API. So what that means is that your Android emulator, your app within the Android emulator would not be able to access the API because you are communicating and transferring information over clear text. So in order to be able to do that, you have to go within your Android emulator and kind of like configure it to allow clear text. It's not the most safe way to do. Uh, Standards suggest that you try to configure your app to communicate on SSL such that you can communicate in such a way that your communications from the app to the server is all encrypted in SSL. So if you look at the screen there, that's the Android emulator trying to send information and receive information from the backend API, but then it's refusing this error. It's refusing and with this error message saying uh, connection refused, error 500, failed to connect. So what we'll be doing next is I would try to show you uh, an environment which I have configured just to be able to demonstrate this problem, and then I will then walk through the solution to the problem itself. Okay, so what I have here is just a simple notes app, or rather a note-taking solution, which is what you see on the screen here. So the solution itself is split into two different apps. We have the Notes API, and we also have the Simple Notes app. So the Simple Notes app is just your basic .NET MAUI app, and we also have the API, which in the API, if I open the program file, is just a simple API, and the API itself has got no controller. I kind of wired the service using the app.mapget, created a simple quick endpoint API/notes, and then just created something like this is a test notes, and just return that via the API. So if I run just the API, so if I change the startup project to, and then just configure that startup project, change it to run a single startup project and run just the API, and okay, and then run that. So while it's running, I would also explain that aside from I've also published this API so that we can have access to the API through IIS. So if I bring up my IIS as well, you will see the IIS, the API sites within the IIS. And also if I take that, if I browse to, so it's running on ports 5220. So if I browse to 5220, that should bring it up for us shortly. And yes, there we are. So I have the Swagger, which I also configured for the API. And then there's the test notes API. So it's just a simple get method to return the notes that have been created. Just something really simple, just to try out the problem. And once I try it out there and execute, you see over there it returns this is a test note. So this is me just running this via IIS and over this endpoint localhost 5220/API/notes. So this API itself has now been called from the Notes app. So if I go over to the Notes app itself, you will see that I set up a service just here. If I open that service, there's a node service that's so not service. There's a view model. So if I open the view model, you will see that there's a base address, the 5220. The client, HTTP client has been defined to read. So it's all hard coded. You won't normally do this in production. It's just a way for me to quickly show you what the problems are, and then the endpoints, and also the URL where it is going to reach the API from. So it's going to get the nodes, and using a JSON serializer, serializing to a nodes object, and then displays the nodes using. So this application is using the MVVM method. So it's going to just display that in the view. So if you open the view, the main page of the view, you will see the nodes will be displayed there. And if I run this app, so let's just quickly go back and set the startup project again. So if I go to configure the startup project for this app, just right click there and configure startup projects. I will just change this to single app, simple notes app, and then okay that. And then firstly, let's run this from a Windows machine emulator. So if I run this and see what the result is. So expect that this would connect to the API, load the Notes app, and then display that on the Windows machine interface. So that is the expected result for this. Um, so this I put a breakpoint there to just step through it. So I'll just step through and then let's just walk through it. So you see what the problem is. So the problem would not normally show up when you are running on a Windows machine, because the Windows machine do not have problems interpreting the local hosts. They can directly interpret the local host. So this would always work. So that is the Notes to clients connecting to the Notes app itself. And it's apparently a success. So I'll just continue on. Click on the continue. Yep, that's our test notes working as it should within the Windows machine. So, but what happens if we decide to run this from an emulator? I have set up a couple of emulator here, a Pixel 5, API 33, Android 13.0, API 33. If you do not know how to set up this emulators, just let me know. It's possible for you to set up Android API. Leave a comment below. I would in my subsequent video I can walk you through how to set up an emulator. So, but for now, I have set up the Pixel 5 API 33 Android emulator. So if I click on that, change that to this, saying I want to run this from an emulator, and I start again. So it's going to hit this breakpoint, and then we can just debug and step into it, and hopefully that problem would show up. So it's running and it should hit the breakpoint any moment from now. So I forgot to mention, this method is actually the load notes synchronous method, right? That is loading the notes. This is wired through the community VVM to the main page view. So if I show you the main page view, this is wired to is binded to the item source, the notes objects from the main view page, which is a property and observable collection properties within the main page view model. So this is the notes. It's binded actually to the main page. And what these load notes are saying is loading the notes from the API and then populating these notes objects, which using the bindable features of .NET MAUI is able to bind this to the main page collection view just right here. So let's see, as this hits the debugger, have a look. Okay, so here we go. So the Pixel 5 emulator has been launched and we have hit the breakpoint just right there. So if I step into, just move that up. So the load nodes async has now been called. So if I step right into it, one at a time. Okay, so now it's trying to, so yeah, it's the error right there. There's an exception. So that exception I have wrote to the console. I'm writing the exception to the console. So if I step right into that, okay, and that writes the exception to the console. So if we quickly open our app, so there you go, you would see the error fetching notes, connection failure, connection failure. So there you go. So that is the problem that we are having. So, but if I browse over to the app itself, to the browser, if I browse to the browser of the app itself, so if I browse over to the app itself and I try to browse directly to the API on the app, on the mobile emulator itself, you'll see it says the site can't be reached. So localhost refused to connect because localhost is referring to the Android emulator. And the API itself has not been loaded on the emulator. It's loaded outside of the emulator on my local machine. So the emulator can't reach localhost as it's currently configured outside the emulator because localhost refers to an environment within the emulator. So this is the URL that we have that is currently pointing to the localhost, which is on the Android emulator. But we need to point to the machine that is hosting the emulator, to the API server that is hosting the emulator. So I would copy this. Let's just say this is old, and then just copy this again so it's clear, and then change this to new, and the uh, endpoints, the IP address that would be pointing outside to your machine is usually referenced on this IP configuration here, which is 10.0.2.2. So I will change the localhost here to 10.0.2.2. So copy this and then the port number, yep, valid. Ensure the port number is the correct port number, and then I will just copy that URL now. So let's go back to the emulator and just give this a test and see what it says. So I'm right here in the emulator now. I don't know what this is showing, just a random page. So just minimize that, open, and then try to paste that into the search bar there, and then let's see. Yes, so we are able to get to the Android emulator, which is what we have there. So let's go back to our solution. So this is the solution which we had before. Same solution with the problem. So, but what I have now done, I have tried to kind of improve on the solution just a little bit. One of the first things I did was to introduce the app setting, so I can put the configuration directly in the app setting. And in the app setting, which is a JSON file, I have a base URL which you can see. So I have moved the endpoints, the base URL from the main page view model where it was before and commented this out, and I have moved it over to the app settings. And in my MAUI program file, I have also loaded that app settings, which is what that code is doing. Loaded the app settings and then read the base URL file. So one other thing I've done is I have put in an if condition right there to say if that says if the file that has been detected is localhost, change that to 10.0.2.2 for Android emulators. So which is one of the things I have done there. So once it sees that, it would change that to 10.0.2.2. You could maybe have an implementation yourself within the config file, but I have chosen to just implement that within the MAUI program file itself. So if we run this, we expect that this would run and we'll be able to load the notes entry. So now after making that fix right in the MAUI program, I will just give the code a run to launch in the emulator, which again, it's on Pixel 5, API 33, Android 13.0. So we wait for it to fully load and hopefully this works. Yep, it's going and should hit the breakpoints on the main page view model. Yes, it's done that. So maybe I could just zoom out so you see clearly. Yeah, there we go. So I'll step into this code now and hopefully that should be resolved. And yeah, it's worked. Okay. Uh, Reading the JSON file, serializing into the notes objects, and then if I just click on continue there you go. So we have our test notes. The notes app is working as it should. Okay, so a quick recap of what has happened here. Before the recap, one other thing which we did, which I should talk about, is because this was hosted on IIS right here, and it was hosted on HTTP, not HTTPS. You usually find emulators blocking clear text messages, right? Clear text communications between the emulator and maybe your any server. So it blocks it by default. So what I've done is to go under platforms, right in the Simple Notes app, and under Android manifests, right click on that, open with XML text editor. It's okay. And there you go. And I put in this entry. I'll just put that there. Android uses clear text traffic, it's equal to true. Okay, so that flag, that configuration allows us to be able to communicate outside of the emulator in clear text messages. So it's allowing the text to travel. It's not what you normally would do in a production setting, but because this is just a test, we are still within the dev environment, and some of these things sometimes can just take developers a long time while they just want to quickly just work on code, test it, and make sure it works. So there you go. You have to use this clear text traffic flag, set it to true, and then you can communicate. So just a summary of what we have talked about. So we found out that uh, localhost doesn't refer, when you point to localhost, it doesn't refer to the localhost on your machine, but the localhost on the emulator. So if you're trying to reach the localhost on the emulator, uh, while this server is hosted on your machine, it would fail just like with one of the things we have demonstrated. So to be able to reach the one on, you have to change your IP address to to which is what we have done on the MAUI program here, 10.0.2.2. So this should be your new IP address, which is what is going to be referring to your machine where the emulator is hosted on. And also do not forget the clear text message, the clear text traffic. You have to set the flag to true as well. Once you do all of that, your emulator will be able to load content from your API server. All right, thank you so much for joining us for this my very first video. I'm so happy that you made it this far. Um, this is going to be the first part of most of our my learning journey. Particularly, I'll be bringing you challenges, common problems, and the solutions that I meet on the way as I go on this journey. We would be focusing on dev, AI, API, accessibility, and all of that technical language. But if you found this helpful in any way, if you think this video is good, please just give us a like. It helps others to discover this content. Also, please feel free to drop a comment if you have ever experienced something like this, and if you had a different approach to the problem. We are all still learning here, and let me know if there are other topics you would like me to talk about. And also, please subscribe so you get notified of our subsequent posts that I'll be making. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you in our next posting. Thank you. Bye bye.